Hey, folks. I had this idea and I don't know how well it's going to go, but one of the challenges that you run into with Path of Exile is there's not a lot of ground to stand on as far as, telling you how exactly to build a build. So, for the most part, most of us start off here on this beach and trying to make the best choices that we possibly made. Um, Oftentimes equating classes to be more like a Diablo class fantasy and not just a starting place on the passive tree. And then when it comes to like building out your passives, you're just really starting out and looking. Okay, do I want damage and energy shield, or do I want chaos damage and life and physical damage? Okay, well, let's go down that path. And that's going to eventually lead to coordination. Well, and every time you hit one of these branches, you're trying to make the best possible decision, looking out only one or two nodes in front of you. And you can get through the campaign like this. This is absolutely a way to get through the campaign, but it's also like the way to build a wildly suboptimal build. Like, this character that I'm on right now is the one that I had created just to get an achievement, and I'm still slowly working at it. So I specifically went down this path just because I wanted better survivability quickly. But like, I wouldn't build a real character this way probably. So you're not given a lot of guidance as you're sitting here on the beach and you find your way to Hillock and kill it the first time and fumble your way through the story. Um, Now, Path of Exile players are going to tell you that you should follow a guide, and that is probably correct uh, advice. But the problem is, following a guide isn't that much easier of a path. So we're going to talk about that. So if you're like me, you're going to simply Google POE builds, which more than likely will lead you to POE Vault by Icy Veins. Um, there's a couple other sites. Maxroll.gg has a build guide. And you're going to get this directory full of builds and not have a clue what any of these really mean. Um, so just for Crucible builds, which is the current build, there are 54 published, all of which are varying degrees of good ideas or bad ideas. Like, some of these probably shouldn't be started. Um, and over time, you learn that you can come here and add the tag League Starter, or maybe League Starter, and it's not letting me choose multiple tags. Um, but this starts to get into a better lineup of builds that you should be paying attention to. So, um, low budget is important because you're not going to have any budget starting this out. Um, All arounder is probably pretty important for a player who's just looking for a single build to do as much of the content as they want. Um, but what ended up with me is I found my way out to YouTube and I started searching for some of these builds to see if I could find some footage playing it. So a very popular build is Explosive Arrow Champion. And there's Explosive Arrow Elementalist, and there's Explosive Arrow Trickster, and there's Explosive Arrow, lots of variants. I think it's a Raider variant. So you're gonna find a ton of videos. So like, if you're like me, you may start with Zizarid's build, which is the most popular. And Ziz tries really hard to make a guide that can be followed, but Ziz also is operating at a level of a decade worth of experience with Path of Exile, and maybe doesn't necessarily cover everything that somebody brand new starting out is gonna come across. But you can follow one of his videos, or honestly any of the other video creators, and probably get in the neighborhood of a build. Um, like on PoE Vault, here's their version of the explosive arrow champion build guide. And again, the problem is like, so this is somewhat followable. You can see, um, you know, what gym links that you're going to be focused on, what you want in each of the sockets or in each of the slots gear wise. Um, but like this also doesn't really cover a lot of things like how you're going to stay alive. And that was what I struggled with the most my first several leagues, is realizing things like resistances are not optional. You need those capped no matter what. Also, you need more than one defensive layer. Um, so what's going to happen is sooner or later, one of these guides is going to lead you to a tool called Path of Building. And Path of Building is not for the faint of heart. So realistically, like it is designed to give you a path that you can follow, and allow one of these build guide creators to like create, here's what your first 20 points are going to look like. And this is a really good one. This one is, I think, the Zizran POB for Path of or for Explosive Arrow Champion. So like they have breakdowns of, this is what your first 20 points is going to look like. This is what your next 20 points is going to look like. And as you expand it out, it shows where you're going to dive down into the tree next. And this is designed in a way so that it is going to give you the best chances of success, because there are absolutely nodes that are more valuable early than they are later. So rushing down to get some of those key survival or key damage nodes makes the rest of your playthrough a little bit easier. And like this will eventually go down to like this is more akin to what my explosive arrow build looks like. So it's got extensions out in lots of different directions. And like this one requires you to have 115 passive points in order to build this out. And if you really want to, like, it'll go into cluster builds where you add cluster jewels, and that just adds extra levels of complexity. But to a new player, like, this is kind of an incomprehensible tool. Like, it's very powerful once you know what you're doing, but a lot of this stuff doesn't mean anything. And a lot of the build guides creators will put notes in here which are helpful. So like how to craft a bow, what flasks you should focus on, a bunch of Q&A. And again, like this is really useful information. However, it is useful information for someone who already kind of knows their way through playing Path of Exile. But again, similar, like it will show you what your Act 1 skills are going to look like, what your Act 2 skills are going to look like, your Act 3, and then what your clear for map clear is going to look like versus what your single target setup is going to look like. So again, this is a really useful build. And once you've gotten to the point of being able to navigate Path of Building, you've opened up a whole new territory to where the last several builds that I made this league, I didn't even use Path of Building. Well, I did, but I didn't even start with like a guide like this. Um, there's a website out there called POE.Ninja. And it is, for those who've never been out here, this is basically the price guide to everything in Path of Exile. It'll tell you at any point, like, what a divine orb is going for. So, like yesterday, this divine orb was, I think, going for 198, and it's dropped down to 194 chaos. Anyway, I only show this page because this is what you're going to land on when you first hit it. However, one of the things that they do that's really useful is they essentially inventory all of the builds in the league, or at least a lot of the builds in the league, some of the best performing builds in the league. So say you want to play with Wintertide Brand. Okay, so 26 characters have been cataloged playing with Wintertide Brand, and I doubt mine is actually in the list. But, so if I wanted to play a Wintertide Brand build, this would give me a couple of characters to look at. So, like, I know things about builds now that I didn't when I started out. Like, for example, if you ever see a build with a life pool of 1, that means that is a Chaos Inoculation build. Chaos Inoculation is an ability that drops your health to 1, but makes you invulnerable to chaos damage. So, unless you want to deal with that, I know I can, weed those out. So let's say I only want to look at builds that have 4,000 health at least. I don't know. There we go. So I have now whittled it down to these are the builds that fit that parameter. So if I am curious about DPS, so yeah, these are all kind of ZTPS builds. Dot damage doesn't really show up effectively in POE.Ninja, but we can just take a look at one of these and it'll show you, okay, this build is built around a couple of uniques. This tells you it is out of your price range if you see a Mage Blood. However, they didn't start out with a Mage Blood. And one of the cool things that you can do on this site is you can say, okay, show me a snapshot. And it looks like week 11 is when this first showed up, and they had a Mage Blood. So that's a bad example. Let's find someone down here. Yep. That's also a bad example. These are all builds that people created during the league. Okay, let's back up and try something different. Let's go with the most popular build, Righteous Fire. So let's look at this. Looks like a standard Fire Trap Righteous Fire. So let's look at their snapshot, and sure enough, you can see this is what they looked like on day 2. And this is what their tree looked like at day 2. These were the keystones that they had at day 2. This is what they got started on their build with. So it gives you the ability to kind of reverse engineer builds. So if you know there's a specific skill gem that you want to build around, you can go in here and see, what did they look like at week 2? Okay. Week 2, they added a bunch more stuff. So they've got a Saffels frame now. They've got their Legacy of Fury boots. They've got an Immortal Flesh. Um, so you can see how they backed into their build. And then it looks like week 13 is the next snapshot. So they're trying dual wielding for whatever reason. Like, that's a little bit weird for a RF jug, but they've also got a mage blood. So again, we're immediately out of price territory for everyone. But you can see like what expensive jewels they're using, so you can start to plot a course for these are the things that I could probably add to my build to make it work a little bit better. Another feature of this is if there's a streamer that you follow, you can literally just come over here and see the builds that they're running. So I don't recognize a lot of these streamers, but I do recognize DS Lily. So if you want to see I think this was a totem build, maybe. Anomalous Frenzy. This is Mana Forged Arrows. So these were very popular builds this league, to where you basically, every time you hit something with whatever your highest expensed hit skill was, it fired all of your arrows off. So you see like Scourge Arrow, there's basically arrow shots everywhere. And every time they would fire that one, it would fire off a bunch of different copies. But, if you're curious what the streamer that you were watching has build-wise, there's an entire section here devoted for streamers. Also, if you wanted to, let's see, Namahu's Flame is a 0.00% of builds item, but if you wanted to see someone that's using Namahu's Flame, which is an axe, you can look for builds that are utilizing that weapon. This is extremely helpful, but like, using this site requires you to now have an understanding of how you went from following an explicit guide to path of building to finally ending up over here on POE.Ninja and being able to cherry pick only the elements that you really want out of builds. So anyway, like I said, it's kind of hard to get to that point, but that's also kind of the progression that I've been on the last 4 leagues, is reaching a point to where I'm still following guides, but I'm getting my guides from other players in the league, and I'm taking, quote unquote tech that they're using and then trying to apply it to my own builds. I don't feel like I am going off and creating my own build yet, but my hope is at some point that's the next evolution of this journey, is that instead of coming in here and looking at this chieftain build, I can go off on my own path and feel confident that like I can just build my own chieftain. And honestly, like, I kind of did that with my Scion. I knew what would add power to a fire build, and I followed that down the line, and I looked at other builds that used Armageddon brand, what kind of links that they used with them. so that I could kind of figure out how I needed to gear myself and what gyms to use, to eventually arrive at a point where I had a character that was at least somewhat viable. Um, and yeah, I mean, like, so if we come back over to POB, this is where my Scion ended up, and I ended up here because I was looking at other people using Armageddon brand, so that I could see what I needed to make Armageddon brand fire off. And then, I started looking for nodes that would be beneficial for the types of damage that it dealt with, while at the same time trying to pick up as much survival as I could. So, like, I don't consider the Scion a full success, but it was my first time breaking out on my own and trying to create a character from whole cloth without directly following a guide. So, anyway, I'm hoping, 4 more leagues down the road, um, I may still be relying on Righteous Fire as a crutch because it's easy and it's profitable. But at the same time, I'm hoping, like right now, I'm using Righteous Fire as a way to fund all of the weird little projects that I want to play with. So I'm hoping at some point I'll feel confident enough just to league start one of my dumb ideas and see where I go. But anyway, I just kind of wanted to talk through the progression of how one gets from, you know, a guide, or more so how one gets from just half-assing their way through Path of Exile to following a guide to refining that process to eventually ending up, you know, in your own territory and the comfortability of making decisions on your own. Um, Not that anything that I just said is really a, a followable process, but I'm kind of just outlining, like, these are the steps that I went through, and it took me 4 leagues to get to where I am now. Um, but like, it's a journey. It's not, you can't just jump straight to success immediately, or if you do, you are far better at this game than I am. And anyway, that's it. That's my dumb video that I wanted to record. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and as always, feel free to ping me with any questions. I'm on all the social medias, so thanks everybody.